if that stand-up is taking longer than 10 minutes, then you need to break it up. It's an anti-marker. The only thing it can do is erase other markers. No, I've got plenty of markers though. I don't actually need it. Um, some things can be worked on, and they're mostly it's mostly one person working on their own. So write down like specific roles. If you have feature groups, it can be useful to have a lead for each feature group. So there is a lead engineer, say, a lead design, a lead artist. Their role is specifically to review the work. The assumption here is that the producer doesn't necessarily need to know the quality of the work because their job is to track the schedule and coordinate the work so that when you're looking at a project, a lot of work will need some other feature before it can be worked on. You're like, okay, this has to come after this other thing, but it has to be before this thing. And so therefore you need to fit the pieces actually together. So the producer is responsible for going like, well, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to do this for everybody. And the producer is also responsible for going, we're actually behind. We're going to need to push all this back. Slash, we can't push anything back because there's a deadline. We need to cut stuff. A lot of times the producer's job is to go with people who are like, well, we could add this feature and it would make life better. Usually that's designers because they're terrible. Often, everybody says, we should actually build this other thing. When that happens, that doesn't make your timeline bigger. So what it means is if you need to spend more time on one thing, you need to take away parts of something else. You just can't make time for free. With the leads, they're generally useful once you get above, I'd say above, well, let me say greater than or equal to 4 in a group, honestly. It's really just you need somebody who can um, say everything is up to par in the area. And it can also be useful if you need somebody to be the final say on a decision. Usually for a lot of projects, for a lot of games, you'll have a director role, like creative director. If the director can't be everywhere, you'll have the lead of that like design making the call. In software, usually the product manager serves as both the producer and the like director of that feature. So producer is more of a game term, and then a software company will usually have a product manager. Um, what you can do when you are working on a more complicated feature than one that people can kind of work on individually, if it requires coordination. So for an example, if you're working on a game and you want to do character attacks, a character attack is going to require, animation. It's going to require design. It might require some engineering. It probably effects. It might have some SFX. So you have to make it be cool and functional. You're going to need to do all these things, and you have two choices. In a waterfall model, what you need to do is decide what order they go in. So you'd have to say first we design it, and when that's done, we build the animation for it. And when that's done, we're going to build the visual effects, and when that's done, we're going to build the sound effects. That is it's something that you kind of get forced into because of schedules, because you're so big. It's not super ideal for getting high quality work, So in a game sense, some types of games are more manageable like this than others. If you are working on like a turn-based game, where turn-based games are kind of heavy on design anyway, uh, then you can get away with, well, as long as the mechanics are right, we can tweak this stuff later and like fit it to that design. If you're working on something more like real time, so like an action game or something, you need to do iterative cycles of you build a little bit of design, you kind of implement it with some animation, and then you tweak it and you tune it. And in order to do that, you're going to need to bundle these people together. So, and that's kind of an advantage of a smaller team, is that it's much easier to grab people and say, for the next 2 weeks, you're going to be working together on this feature. So usually we call those pods, which is a group of people to work on a feature. So in a game company, a lot of times that will mean there's going to be, say, a combat pod. And what the combat pod will do is build their schedule, working with the producer, to say, these are the new features we're going to build. It's going to be a new character. We're going to need to design it, model it, and animate it, and build the effects. And if you are in these smallish blocks of time, you can do things like say, let's build a new character that'll fit within 2 weeks. That's beautiful if that happens. And what you want to happen is that from your kickoff, then a couple days in, your pod meets, say your pod meets and your pod meets. And so these are the like 3 to 5 to 6 people that are specifically working on this feature together. I would say normally a pod, if you're going above 7, it's going to be unwieldy and it's going to get difficult for that sort of thing. Okay. What's hard about it? Okay. Okay. Communicating what things are you trying to communicate? Okay. 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 Interesting. So you've got like linking the two, you've got the features and you have the API. Is there an interface? There's not like a human interface, is there? Okay. What all needs to what because this is like product features that need to match, right? Okay. 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 So they have specific needs. So then what you need to do is identify um you need to identify the features that they need delivered to work on. Does that sound right? Like, so you said they need certain things working before they can work. This is really similar to the stuff we had, like in school, we were building our own game engines. So when I was like the technical designer with a bunch of engineers. And so I'm kind of waiting for them to build features so that I can make stuff in the same way. Like, are you guys going to build a level editor? I can't really make levels until it exists, but you have to kind of schedule all that stuff out. So like what features do they actually are they waiting for? Okay. Okay. You're delivering the full text to the front end. Okay. Okay. So, um, are they prepared to receive that text? Is that what are they waiting on from you? Okay. Like here's what I would assume. I would assume that you need to have a meeting to define how they're going to receive text. Like, because text is going to go from the user in and from the machine back out, right? Do you guys have this sorted? Okay. Well, you guys are sending text, right? Okay, so you send text out and then the user sends back button input. Okay. Okay. So have you decided that what this is? Okay, so this is actually hooked up and all working? Okay. So, but you feel like you don't actually know what's going on right now? Right. Right. And I mean, obviously school projects are weird because people have different levels of commitment for like some people take one class really seriously and some don't. Um, what sure. 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 Yeah. Sure. 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 So did you, when you were defining, so I'm assuming this is like in a big meeting with everybody, right? With like all 8 people you're talking about this? Okay. What did you get at the end of it? Did you have like a list of features that everybody was working on? Okay. Like they don't know exactly what they need to build at that point? Okay. It wasn't a very good, like, it wasn't, this isn't actually a good place to split the work. Okay. Sure. Sure. I would say, I think I would have two questions. One, how much could you have at that point told them every API point? Because like under, and this is really a waterfall model. If it's hard to communicate between this area, you want more things kind of defined in advance and more stuff being like, listen, these are the functions, these are how they're going to get called. And that would allow them to build everything they need by putting test like dummy data in for that, right? Okay. Because and I might be misusing this, but like in a generic, like you could treat these as two separate programs as long as you defined the connection point between them, right? Or even in an object-oriented model, you're told like, what's the interface for your class in that sort of way. So I should call this. I mean, if I call it programming interface, that's actually what that means. But that's what I mean. Like, if you find it hard to communicate, then one of your first responsibilities should be defining the interface that you're going to use because that restricts a lot of the functionality, but that also lets them work as long as they're working to this and you're going to deliver to that, you'll be okay. That's not the sprint like the Scrum way to do it. That's like they're far away. Like if you're working with teams split across like the globe, say you've got like in another country, you've got a team doing the front end and you're doing the back end. Stuff like being really upfront and defining this as some of your first steps is going to be super important. If, on the other hand, you want to be more organic with it, what I would want to do in that case, and you've got, what was it, like 8 weeks to do that or something? If you're doing project kickoff and you have 8 people, the first thing I would do is do roles. I would assign producers and directors. And if it's more software like, you could just, these could just be the same person as a PM, right? If you have that, then it's not a diffuse responsibility. It's not, hey, everybody, we should do this. It's, this will boil down to one person. So X does this. And if everybody can yell at X, and X is the one responsible. And if you're split into two teams, you would have a producer or a product manager on both sides. Once you have defined the roles, you have a choice to make. You can do the design together. I think with 8 people, you can probably do the design together. So what I would say is this is the high level design. So what I would want to come out of this is a list of epics. By epic, I mean a task that holds multiple tasks that might take you more than one. So if the epic is the state machine can continue doing output and be reset, like maybe that's actually going to take a bunch of different tasks under it, and so you're like, this is the getting the state machine actually flowing correctly task. With the level that you want to do the design at the beginning of your project is enough to plan out your calendar. Like that's your goal. It's good enough if you can plan the calendar for the project for it. So if you've got 12 weeks, then what you want to be able to do at the end of your first meeting. So I'm expecting this to take place first week. Like this is maybe one meeting or two meetings. Is that you can say, this is going to go here. This is going to go here. There's going to be one that we start here that's going to take this long, and so on and so forth. So that you know that by the end you've covered the whole thing. You've also finished it by here because you're going to need flex time because you're going to go over because it's not going to work correctly. Because anytime somebody gives you an estimate, they're estimating for what if everything went right. They're not estimating for what if I finished it and then I had to spend twice the time debugging it. So if your job is the producer, then your job is to listen to when people say how long it'll take and double it. It's just how it is. I'm literally the worst person in the world at it. I'm so optimistic. I know, I know. I'm so bad. Um, but I mean, I'm a designer, so I have an excuse. So once you've done that, you're actually looking at a bunch of 2 week sprints. And ideally, you can assign these and say, this is going to be these people who are going to get this feature done. This is going to be these people who are going to get this feature done. This is going to be this. So you have a project timetable that is public. And what you're going to do is every milestone, at every milestone, you are going to show the calendar. It's always good to start a meeting where you're like, this is how much time we have left by saying, this is how much time we have left, and this is how much work we have to do. That has a focusing effect on people. How do you work on it and working with clients? Like, and then you make them do it every week they want something new or they still want something to change. You remind them. No. What you do with that is you rely on the fact that you have to cut features. Um, so you have to do this at the start, right? So you're working with a client, and you're like, we're going to build this, and you've done this, and you say it'll take this long for these features. And when they say, hold on, I need a new feature, Lambda, you figure out how much time that is. Okay, that's going to take this time from this many people. And then you say, I need to cut something. And you communicate back to the client, this is what I'm planning on cutting, or I need this much more time. That's kind of the only way you can do it. Because you also have the choice of saying, sure, no problem, we can do it. But remember, it's also going to take double that. You know, if you forgot to double your estimate already, it's going to take double that time. So this is actually a point where having this put into a role so that the producer, they're like, look, I don't care what the feature set is. I just need this to ship on time. That's kind of where it's nice to separate this. Because the director can be going, oh man, it would be so much better. It's actually, you know what? We actually have to have this new feature. This thing won't work if we don't have this new feature. Having that separated from the person who keeps the calendar is useful because the calendar person says, I'm a neutral, I'm a judge. All I'm going to do is tell you if you add that, you have to find that much time to cut. And that's where assigning these roles, rather than let it be like kind of diffuse, like, oh, everybody's working on it, having that is so useful. It gives everybody a place to talk to. It gives everybody a final decision. Like even in a very democratic, like small team, you achieve that democracy by in the meetings when you're deciding the features, like that's when everybody gets their say and is like, okay, we want to do this together. The meeting is where the feature meeting is the place to actually, I don't know, I wrote feature meeting somewhere, is the place for where people get to say, like, I want to do this, and you kind of talk it through. Once you've done that, you're going to kill yourselves if you're going to keep allowing like everybody to keep switching stuff up. And everybody on the project will be less happy. So you democratically assign these roles in your features, and then you have rules. There are some tools that you can use when this starts to go bad. 12 weeks is nicely a short period of time. If you have a longer project, what will start happening is people will start to get worried because they know that things aren't working. And usually, what people worry about are not the features that they're working on. A lot of times, they're worried about what other people are doing. And a lot of that worry is that nobody knows. They're like, oh, I have identified that the UI is not going to be ready and nobody cares about it. I care about it, but I think nobody else does. So there's a couple ways to manage this. If team morale is pretty bad, one of the best tools you can use is to get everybody together and do a dependency map. So in a dependency map, you have everybody draw, like everyone goes to a whiteboard. A whiteboard is a good place to do it. And they write about they write a feature that they're concerned isn't being done. So in a game, if I do this, I would have an engineer go up and say, I don't think that the progression is going to get done. I'm really worried because I don't think there's a plan and it's not going to fit in the game. And you might have the designer go up and say, I don't think that multiplayer is going to work because the online is not working now and I have a feeling that it never will. And so on and so forth. And this can be a lot more specific. It can be like, um, it can go down to individual features, but A lot of times, if you want to do that variable level, you should write something small and something's big, but it's not a big deal. So that's step one. And then step two is people claim responsibility. So once this happens, the engineer has written this down. It doesn't, you don't need to like say who wrote it down. That doesn't matter that much. But if it's a smaller group, it won't be a problem. Then the designer goes up and they say, "Oh, don't worry, I've got that." They like sign it or something. And the engineer goes to the multiplier and they say, "This is something that's in my schedule. I'm going to work on it. It'll be fine. You guys don't need to worry." Or you may also find things that are not claimed that you just never thought about. Say it's the title screen. Oh shoot, we forgot to do a title screen. That's fine because that means once you've done this, you can plan discovered features, plan the discoveries, I'll call it. So that's when you're like, whoops, we actually forgot to do this in our plan, which is why another reason why you doubled all your tasks so that you hopefully have some squish time to fit this in. If you don't have any time to fit this in, you of course need to cut stuff if this is that important. But this is so good. It only works up to a certain number of people, like 10 or 12 people. If you have more than that, you need to break them into chunks. But this can be so good for managing the general sense of doom that is sapping everybody's will in a project. Oh. Um, what else? I'm just gonna grab a couple pieces of software and show you that. Confirm startup. So this will be really, really. Let's see how annoying that was. In terms of actually tracking your thing, you have a couple choices. You guys have probably seen and used a bunch of these. Have you guys used Trello? Yeah. Trello is nice and simple. Let me see if I can get to a demo. Oh, you're right. It is actually owned by Jira now. It didn't used to be. It was it was Jeff Vandermeer that started it, right? Yeah, yeah, that's true. Let me look for a public word. Oh, come on. Oh, you can tell that it's an Atlassian thing because they're so SEO'd on their help. Oh my gosh. They also used to have a non-login portal. Let's see if I've got any old Jira boards hanging around. I don't think this one. Right. No. Um, okay, good enough. So this is really good for sprints. It's less good for like the long-term planning. So and this is less good for a bigger project. So if your project and your features are small enough that you can put it in a form that everybody can look at and you can just drag it from one to one, it's great, super great. You need to be at the end of your kickoff and review meetings. You need to be managing it. Any task tracking software, if you forget about it, it's going to be annoying and useless. Um, for small scope stuff, I think this stuff is totally fine. So you guys have used Jira and stuff like that? Okay, cool. Jira is harder to do sprint like stuff, but it's honestly fine. You can bundle people into groups. It can really do any of that. One of yeah, one of the ones that I've used is I actually don't like this one. Well, so it's a terrible name because you say, well, let's add it. I'll do it. I did it on Monday. Oh, it's very obnoxious. And this is like weirdly slow. This is very slow software, which is noticeable after a while. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I know. So, and this is generally what you do with Jira too. You will define a sprint, which is an object, and then you put tasks in the sprint. And then for each task, you assign it to people. And then what happens is at the end of the sprint, the software will say, hey, these things didn't get done. You need to roll them over or do something. Um, somewhat useful. I think its usefulness is in having it reviewed in public. Like in my experience, most people don't spend that much time on it. There are people who work really well off of a list. There are some people who, if you give them a list of things to do, they're like crank through it. That's a good reason to have this because those people will work so much faster if you put all their work in here. Um, there are people who, like me, who are terrible at checking back into it. And then, like this is really similar to how a lot of Jira's work as well. Um, you load the tasks and you finish them and you check them off, and you can mark dependencies between them and do all that stuff. This is almost always the producer's responsibility to like maintain this and keep this looking good because nobody else will. The super important thing, no matter what, that you're going to need is, of course, a bugs list. Um, and this is generally a pile that you dump stuff in. Yeah. Yeah. And when you think about it, especially in a team of this size, um, you're not going, okay, this is actually super, thank you for that. So people are going to be experts in multiple things. And of course people can pick stuff up. But in general, of course, you're going to see a vague responsibility. Like this engineer's the one who's mostly responsible for physics. This engineer is the one who's most responsible for AI. And that's useful. It keeps people from like fighting over stuff. Um, when you want to group people for a sprint and say, okay, this is a feature that's going to need, it's going to be an AI feature. So it's like, say it's the combat feature. So it's going to need design. It's going to need the AI to work in the animation and stuff. You grab those people together, but the programmer might need 4 days on it. The designer might need 5 days. The VFX person might only need 1 day. So the VFX person does need to kind of be in these meetings, which can be kind of a waste of their time, which is a reason why this type of grabbing people out of their thing breaks down if your company is too big. I think it's worth the time if you are, below 20 people. It's not that hard to do. Um, if you can keep your meetings diligent and well organized. At a big company, so at like Monolith, we were more distributed between disciplines. There was an animation group that had their own lead and their own producer. there was a character modeling group that had their own lead and their own producer. When because I was like the gameplay lead, when I wanted to get something done like a character, what I did is I said, can I grab people for this feature so that they're going to be available for these meetings and they won't really be working on other stuff because I want them working with this other person because it's kind of like pair programming. You can kind of the designer is like sitting right next to the animator and kind of talking through that. When I was doing that, I was making it harder for them to schedule work, but it was worth it for how important it was for the game. So this animation lead, what they would see is requests coming in from like the cutscenes. They would see requests from the level design team who would want some special character animations to like communicate stuff. They would see requests coming in from combat. And so the easiest thing for them to do is like treat their people as kind of fungible resources and like reassign them on that. So what I was asking for was an exception to say, I want to grab one animator to do this and kind of block out their time. And that might cause some days where they could have been doing other stuff, but I would rather have them do that. Like I was grabbing that bit of inefficiency in order to get the quality better on that and like get the speed of doing that better, doing the combat better. On a smaller team with these pods. So for example, this is like 17-bit. We have like a UI pod and a combat pod, and a lot of the engineers are on two of them out of the like six. I am on most of them because I'm closer to that. Like I kind of have things to say about every part of the design. So because of that, I spend a lot more time like in meetings than other people who are doing more implementation. And this is like around 15 people. So it'll be a situation where it's like, okay, on Tuesday we're going to have 3 different pod meetings, and the producer will be there for all of them. I will actually be there for all of them because I need to know what's going on in them, and I kind of need to know that scope. But other designers will only be in one of them. You know, other engineers will only have to go in one. Um, there is. This is actually. I want to show you this because I really am appreciating this, and it's really expensive, but it's actually the same price as Jira. So, not for long. This is Airtable, which structures it more as a database interface, um, which I actually really like. So what that means is that you define a table with your columns, and you have a bunch of tools to you create views into them. So in this, there's like one master list. This is like the list of all the content here. And then each of these is it's a specific query, basically, that is sorting it. And it can also, if like my master list has the dates on it, I can generate a timeline. This is specifically called a Gantt chart, which is the type of timeline I was drawing. It's the when you do a calendar and you draw the width of every task on it. So this is I don't know this, and you know what? The other thing, when I was complaining about how slow this freaking piece of software is, like look, come on, and like this is the open button. Look at that. This is not, but like this is hyper fast, and it's that thing where you're like, oh, I can tell that this is actually software that is written well. You get that sense of quality from it. So, uh, just a little push for Airtable. Yeah. Anything else? I don't know. I think that's most of what I would cover. Do you have more questions? Huh. There's a question about sprint planning. Um, yeah, the two-sentence answer for your scope thing is if you both have already decided your feature set and you have a calendar, and it's somebody's job to do that. As long as that's not everybody's job, if somebody's like, listen, my job is to tell you that you can't do this. Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what will happen is you'll start with the kind of basic negotiations with them where you're like, for example, working on card games. What we've been doing is we kind of have a game that is working, and we've been having meetings with people and saying, "Hey, we could make this game with your characters. We would kind of change, like we play a game with them, and then we say, you could see how it would work with those characters." And so then we would talk to them about, well, what would the license terms be if they like it? So some licenses that are smaller will be, we're not going to give you any money. We'll give you access to our art, and if this is selling, we want X percentage of like how much your game's revenue is. Yeah, yeah. Some of them like if you want to make a Spider-Man game, there's probably a banked commitment for how much money you give in the first place and a royalty. For Lord of the Rings, we had, oh my gosh. So this was actually really silly because the Lord of the Rings license, there was a movie license for Warner Brothers, and that covered the Lord of the Rings books, including the appendix, but not The Hobbit and not the Silmarillion. We couldn't use it. So what it meant was when we wanted to do stuff like Celebrimbor, uh, who doesn't, who's not in Lord of the Rings, but he's referenced in the appendix and we could get away with it. Or like we could make a Morgoth reference because of the appendices. So in order to do that, like once we had all this, I mean, honestly, that was, so there's Monolith who's working on the game. There's Warner Brothers, who we are talking to. And then there's the Tolkien estate. And so originally it was a deal between the Tolkien estate and Warner Brothers. When the game was being worked on, we talked to Warner Brothers and they said, hey, you should make a Lord of the Rings game. Okay, sure. And as we were making the game, we would share stuff with the Tolkien estate. So what that meant is that it was somebody's job to be the license manager, and they would have a list of assets that needed review from the license holder. So this is kind of worked out initially. You go, the license holder says, these are things that we're going to need approval on, and these are things that we don't. And then the what do they call it? It's like an IP producer, basically. We'll take those assets every 2 weeks or so and say, hey, here's our new concept art for characters. So for instance, for this, we would have concepts for orcs. And we would say, these are all the new orc concepts that we're doing. Do you approve them? And they would have the ability to say, no, that's too gory, take it out, or stuff like that. Um, and so it's not a thing where we like finish the whole game and then we give it to them and they're like, no, you have to throw this out because that would be really bad. It's, yeah, I mean, sure, sure. So that is the responsibility. You want to work as much of that out as at the beginning as possible, but that becomes the art director's responsibility, like for specifically character design. That's the art director has to talk in this meeting and be able to communicate back to the artists, like, hey, you guys, this is what we are needing to do so that we don't keep getting tripped up. Because if you don't, then it's just going to cost you work because you're going to have to keep throwing stuff out. But the keeping in regular meetings with your IP holder is the way to do it. There's another way to do it, which is if you're smaller. For instance, on the card games, um, you can negotiate for more rights so that they have less review rights. It just depends. And the more rights that you have as the like licensor, the less it'll be legally specified what they can challenge and say, no, you can't do this. So we try to, when we're negotiating for a license, get less of an onerous review process. Like we don't want to have to meet with them all the time. We want to feel confident that we have legal rights to have a certain amount of freedom, basically. Yeah. That's the sort of thing that probably set out in the contract. Um, because art is fast, it went really easily. I'm pretty sure they sent over scripts. Like we've got writers at this size. There's like 3 or 4 writers who are making stuff all the time. They would send stuff over, but I think less often. They didn't really review gameplay. Um, I think because it's also like what is easy for them to review. In the same way that if you are submitting to a licensing board like the ESRB or something, you it's both you give them representative material and you make a good faith statement. Like you can try to show them your most inoffensive stuff and say something nice, but if they find out later, like the whole system is built on trust, so they have to be really harsh and punishing examples where they feel like somebody betrayed their trust, and it generally works on saying you generally say these are the worst things in it. We think the rating should be this, and they will say, okay, that's fine, or no. What's really weird is that the ESRB has it has moved over to a mostly opt-in system where especially for digital stores, because the old process for packaged games kind of made sense. You'd print your gold master copy of the game and you'd send it to them and then say, we know that this is what it is, so that you pay them like $10,000 to review it or whatever. Once we move to a world where hundreds of games are coming out every day, there's no way they could be big enough to review all that stuff. So they chose to move to a system where like they had a choice. ESRB had a choice of either becoming irrelevant for like digital stores because nobody's going to submit their games for it, or becoming kind of an opt-in situation. So on Steam, uh, iOS and Android store, I think on the console stores too, when you submit your ESRB rating and you're submitting what you think it should be, and you don't actually have to submit anything to the ESRB, I think. So if something happens, basically they're relying on a system of people complaining to them, and then they'll do a review. So you don't want to give a bad rating. There's some stuff as well with you guys know how Balatro has been getting those like adults only ratings all over. Those are less about the review boards and more about legal requirements, because these are a lot of this in like Europe has happened because they specifically passed gambling rules for labeling in games. And so because of that, they're like, well, if it is gambling, like the law is this. And so it was a specific negotiation where the Balatro team was like, well, they had to argue that it wasn't actually gambling and it didn't meet the legal requirement for that like adults only rating. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Balatro is I think just a game. I think anybody who plays games would be like, it's just a game. Mhm. I mean, and the case, the way that like loot boxes and premium purchases go is I think a case where it's really something that is more probably discussed in like a legal class because it's about things that are very similar in quality but are different in quantity. Where you think about trading cards, because this is the obvious analogy. Trading card packs are randomized. They always have been. So they've always got that semi-gambling aspect, but it's not been like a huge area of concern. Collectible card games, follow from trading card games. They're randomized. They have the same element. Loot boxes are very obviously an application of collectible card game packs. Like that is what they're doing. But at the same time, there's all these like little cycles of iteration that are going on in a video game at scale where they have the ability to get instant like feedback from people. This is all computer enabled stuff. They can offer 10 different ways to like promote the pack and see which one people buy the most. They're just way more efficient at like changing and optimizing this in a way that eventually results in something that does seem to be different than the old Magic style blind box pack. Um, I mean, and I don't think marketing makes these decisions. These are like product decisions where there's a very straightforward goal. It's like, okay, last year we sold this many packs. Can we design it better so that it sells this much more? So you have meetings, you say, well, maybe if we do this, it'll work. Maybe if we do this, you have this much time, you implement this many features, and you test them. And like it's not done in a there's one master plan and we're following it sense. It's done in a intelligent people iteratively optimizing way. It just results over years in something that is really kind of nasty. And that's where it's a legal responsibility. It's a there's a political drive. Like when people are complaining about it, they create political pressure to do something about it, and then it is it is the responsibility of the political system to write a legal standard that divides it in a way that is applicable and that serves like the needs that people are asking for. So like what people are asking for is very clearly this seems it's really easy for people to fall into this. It's really easy to become addicted and like spend more than you want. It falls over onto the gambling side and away from the gaming side. Um, as a person making a game, what you are doing there will depend on how your game is monetized. If you're doing free to play, you are going to be making choices about um, how broad for every purchasing point that you have, how many players do you expect to want to purchase this? So the division between like whales and other players, there are certain types of mechanics that are less players are going to want to buy, but they work on those people. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so that is kind of a decision that you have to make in terms of whether you want to work on that. Like, I haven't had to work on those types of games myself, but we've had those conversations. Like we're designing a game for Game Pass. So if you're doing a Game Pass game, you're probably getting funded to not the full cost of your game. And what they say is you'll make some of that if you sell on other platforms where people actually pay you, but you also should be designing for like a more of a live service game where there are reasons for people to pay you more. So you need to do two things. You need to decide what features you think are you're comfortable with selling to people, and then you need to decide what's actually going to work. Uh, you can't specifically you you need to have more than a feeling about these things. You need to look to comparable games and make decisions about which things are generating how much revenue, how many people are buying those things. Well, for design, you need to have a good understanding of what's going to be engaging for people, what they're actually going to like. You you have the ability in a game to do things that motivate people in a way that they will later regret. Any sort of there's a bunch of okay, let me actually pull this up. I have slides on types of motivation. Yeah. How annoying are they? Should I erase these? I feel like I probably should. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yeah. If they have different responsibilities. I mean, you can set people to do pair, like it can be totally reasonable to say you guys should normally work as a pair. Like most people don't permanently assign pair programmers, but honestly, given the ways that I've seen people get stuck on things, it's not crazy to me to say even if I'm using two people to solve this one task, it's faster than leaving them alone. But yeah, for pods, what I mean is with your group, if you want a feature to get done, I was talking about you should plan them in like 2 week chunks, which are the sprints. A lot of times you'll have people working on different aspects that need to combine to complete a feature. A feature is more of a user-facing thing. Like this is a thing that the product does. So in a game, if it's like a character, they need a model, they need to be animated, they need to have design and engineer. So you'd have a pod, you'd have those people together so that they could work together. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in terms of when you were asking about what is okay to get people to want to do. So this is a design lens called octalysis because there's 8 sides. Um, the uh, the idea is that these are different types of motivations that you can give your player to want to do things in your game. Every player is going to be looking for at least one of these things. And usually players like several of them because people are different, they value different things, and they will also value things differently over time. This is something that can be useful to think about when you're first designing your thing for the first time, but also as you're updating it. If you are if you're doing a live game and you want to say, here's a new update, this is why this is interesting to you, you probably want to hit most of these so that people who have different interests are still in the game. There are, if you look at the top and the bottom, they're kind of divided into things that are more pro-social, things that that work on attaining things and feeling better about them. The bottom half, the scarcity, avoidance, unpredictability, are things that people are afraid of missing or losing. So, so these are negative, like negative motivators and positive motivators. They can also be divided between extrinsic factors and intrinsic factors. Um, intrinsic motivators are ones that the player generates the desire themselves based on uh, based on engaging with your game. They're going to generate a motivation to keep going all on their own, although you have designed it so that that happens. They're usually harder and more expensive to deliver because they're very quality based. The extrinsic motivators are things that are specific things that they want. Usually, um, usually these are things that you are promising them in exchange for doing things. So if they do this, they will get this. That's a it's an extrinsic motivator because they don't necessarily want this thing directly. They want to do this thing because it gets them something beyond it. Yep, totally. Um, okay, so a motivator in general, it's a reason that you want to do something. Yeah, this is going over the same thing. Intrinsic motivation, stuff because we specifically want to do that. You want to hang out with friends because you want to feel relatedness. You want to feel social and included with them. Maybe you want to work because you like the challenge and the mastery. That's intrinsic to it. The extrinsic are about the things that you get out of it. You want to work because you want money. Or you want to hang out with people because you specifically want to meet somebody to get a job or to move somewhere else. Like I said, these are in a game, these are a lot harder to specifically achieve, and these are a lot easier to just put in if you need them. And most games do both of these things. Like it's not a specific bright line between good games do this and bad games do this. You just kind of need to develop the blend that you're capable of achieving. Okay. The meaning on the top, where I'm just going to go through this kind of point by point. So this is the epic meaning or your calling. These are things that make a player feel like they're doing something bigger than just playing a video game. So you can do this through narrative if you can get them to care that much about the story, and it doesn't feel like, oh, the story is padding for the rest of it. If they're specifically, I need to see this through because of that. You can do this with characters in the story if they feel a specific desire to help those characters, it can work that way. Um, and you can also motivate it with other aspects. If you have a specific extrinsic motivation that you want to give somebody, like you're going to give them money for the holidays, like it's a bonus. That's a very extrinsic attainment award. But if you also give them a personal note from the developers that says, "Thank you for playing our game. We really appreciate our players," that is generating more of an internal epic meaning because if they feel like they have a relationship with you and they want to continue playing the game because of that, that's an important part. They will feel that way. Mhm, mhm. Those are accomplishments for the most part. Because completing the Pokédex does that. So here's the thing. That's actually so it's got to catch them all, right? Yeah. So so the yeah, I may keep going. I'm gonna keep referencing Pokemon as we go through these, because that's actually pretty good. The other way you can kind of motivate this extrinsically by promising something that people care about that kind of happens outside of the game. If playing the game helps scientific research or something, so something like folding at home, or that can generate meaning within your players that is intrinsic to them, but there's an external thing that you're sticking out there. So it is an external motivator that is building that epic meaning in the player. Okay, well, I've got a lot of those. Yeah, so extrinsically learning things, helping the world, if it's an exercise, so something like Ring Fit or like an exercise game isn't uh it's not an accomplishment. It's something in about the player's personal values, but it's something that they're going to get as a result of playing your game, rather than something that they get out of playing your game. Yeah. Another one that I'm thinking of is, you know how multiplayer games will do team activities that you can't really influence. So, like in Helldivers 2, the way that they structure the campaign is, if you guys all pull together, you can save this planet or something. Um, that is And that is extrinsic, but it is building that epic meaning for the players where they think, I want to participate in that. I want to see that happen. Oh, this is going to go again. Okay. In terms of accomplishment, this is the feeling that you are growing or achieving something along a goal. So a lot of this is done with treadmills, like anything that you have a stepped path of specific. Well, first you can achieve this. That's great. And then your next goal is going to be this. Okay. And then your next goal is going to be this. So a long form quest list can kind of build this. Um, Goals like I want to level up, or I want to improve my gear, or I have to catch them all. Totally fit within that. Step functions, we set up scoring, setting up players to zero, or you can set up new goals. I mean, if you think about you're doing a content update to an MMO, it's going to come with new quest lines, right? Totally an accomplishment-based extrinsic motivator. It will also come with new bosses that you can see and new areas, and that sense of I want to see that new area. I want to play this game well enough that I can do that. I know in World of Warcraft, I played as a druid, and one of the things that I thought was awesome was the seal form, so you can swim. Swimming has no purpose in the game, but one of the things that I wanted to do and I feel the best about was when I went on the East World and I sailed from the port in the marshes all the way down to the tropical port, which doesn't actually make any sense. It's a contiguous path, and at one point it puts you the map will break. It'll say that you're right in the Dwarven capital partway through. But I specifically did a thing that was like nobody's done this, and it was stupid, but it gave me a lot of accomplishment as a result of it. Mhm. So, to the extent that being a powerful character matters as a form of like you see other powerful characters and you want to have that for yourself. Um, I would generally say that that is intrinsic as a goal that you set for yourself, as opposed to something that is measured very specifically of you want to get to this level, or you want to collect all this content. There's something one thing that I think is kind of interesting about accomplishment and leaderboards is that we introduced pretty common leaderboards like in the mid 2000s because we had good online connectivity, but they started failing really fast because once you're placing in a global leaderboard, that's kind of only giving you relevant information for a very small portion of people. So we had that started as what seemed like a decent accomplishment motivator, but it failed really fast. Do you guys know how that was kind of tackled to fix leaderboards that were too big? Totally. Hmm. 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 And I think that also builds a social accomplishment motivator as well. Like that has the nice effect of making the leaderboard more relevant to you because you can compete with it and doing a direct tie-in to people that you actually know. Yeah, totally. You want to improve your rank is extrinsic. That's all the stuff when they're like, you've hit diamond rank. Great. That's what you want to know. But I want to consider myself a good player is intrinsic. Like you could still have that goal if they weren't giving you that extrinsic motivator. Say League never had a rank mode. League was always unranked. You could still build that I want to be a good player without that. They built a whole structure to give you extrinsic ways to measure it and set those goals like that. And what they want is for you to start with the extrinsic ones and kind of strengthen your intrinsic motivator. Empowerment. Okay, so this is making players feel smart or powerful or capable. This can also work if you allow them to be creative and feel like they've done it themselves. Uh, Boosts or power-ups are pretty obvious, like external motivators. Like you just give them power and let them feel it. Let's see, I have a bunch of notes on this. Things like figuring out, okay, this is good for like League or for card games. If your player can figure out new builds and feel like they have gained power by themselves. Yeah.
How do you say most for Diablo? That game, I don't know, but could make it more of a power rankings and stuff like that. But Diablo feels very linear to me.
Okay.
But you create a character
Uh-huh.
that you can. So, what kind of empowerment is Diablo giving outside of
Okay.
that you do, or the dungeons that you do, and you keep finding?
Let's do Diablo builds versus PoE builds.
Oh, I already.
Okay. What's different about them?
Diablo, when you, I'm pretty sure you only get like for a certain build to get one very certain set of gear.
Okay. So it's like a very pre-designed build. Why is it pre-designed? How do you learn what the build is?
I believe it's. I haven't played Diablo in a while. The last one I played was Diablo 3. So,
Oh. Let's say Diablo 3. Maybe they fix it in Diablo 4. So are you saying that this is like the attributes on gear are designed so that they really fit together one way?
yes. So if you have a certain set of gear, you are only like if I get ice an ice something,
Okay.
I need to get the rest of that set to
Uh-huh.
make this particular build work. So
Yeah,
I need ice body armor, ice boots,
sure.
ice range, and whatnot.
I think this is a specific weakness of set mechanics.
Whereas in theory, if you have you build your character and
Mhm.
gear around a certain skill.
Okay.
So, if you have a certain skill, like righteous fire,
Uh-huh.
that's my favorite skill.
Sure.
You can have certain gear
Uh-huh.
around it that you can build towards. There's a best in slot gear.
Hmm.
You don't need that. You can be creative with it and do some other things
So why do you not need the best one?
because there's a bunch of different ways to go about scaling righteous fire.
So is that because so I guess what I'm asking is one actually best or are there different things that are better in different situations?
There are lots of some situations, but I usually go in those spots. But there are multiple versions, multiple about that same.
Okay. Because what
Like I said, it's usually built around that skill.
right.
So in this case, righteous fire, that particular skill has multiple ways to be used and built around.
I mean, what can be really hard is as a game becomes more competitive and as players develop it more, like develop the tech, the amount of player choice seems to decrease because the stuff that is very, very, very good, once players are like, oh, no, this fails 1 out of 100 times, and like that doesn't actually matter in casual play, but you get the metagame really shrinking in that way in super competitive stuff. This is really hard to fight against. I think I think there are different ways to approach this problem. For most games, I'm gonna label this casual and competitive. And what I'm gonna say is that this is um, the uh, the meta space. For most games, luckily, you're working in here because this is always going to be like 95% plus of your players. Um, if your game has a competitive aspect, though, you need to lock this really well and care about it. And if you don't, it, your game will die among the hardcore. If hardcore players leave, a lot of times that can cause casual players to leave. So it depends on what you are actually responsible for. For a game like Shadow of War, we're a single player game, and there was an async competitive mode, but it wasn't really that competitive. And so because of that, my rule of thumb was this needs to be balanced for single player, which means I don't want anything to be so good that everything else is boring. However, if something is really awesome, that's fine. It just can't be so dominant that you feel like you can't play other stuff because there's so many ways to win. It that changes in competitive spaces. Um, One thing I will say specifically about set mechanics is that they I think a problem they can become very prescriptive, like you said. I think in a lot of competitive games that have like pre-designed combos like this, what usually happens is that the designers need to be careful about not balancing this too strongly because it's like a gimme to the players. They're saying this is a combo. Usually, once you get to the competitive game, these are not useful anymore because the designers are just like, we can't give that away. I think one problem with this is when if you have, say Diablo, you have 6 gear slots. If you have set pieces for all of them, then you're saying it's very likely that the strongest version of the set is doing them all. I don't actually see why you would even want to do that. Like, just cap your set bonus at 4 and leave slots available all the time. I don't know. I made sure to do that in Shadow because, like, while the set bonus existed on all 6 pieces of gear, you didn't get any extra bonuses by equipping more than 4, so that you didn't feel constrained inside of that. Like, um, I think I think unpacking what is what makes the best for this. That like in Path of Exile, they give you a lot of routes to get to the same place. Like, because you can slot gems to buff a skill on kind of any gear, right? Okay, so what they're saying is we don't care which piece of gear you put this in, which radically opens the possibility space, and it means that gear slots kind of mean less than they do otherwise. So it is making a more free-form game and saying to the player, you figure it out. On the other hand, that making it more freeform is giving less guidance to your player. So you are doing less design work because you're asking players to do almost more of the design work themselves. So you have to know what you're asking for the players and whether they're motivated to do that. Blizzard is thinking Diablo is for 10, 15 million people to play. We think out of those people, maybe 2/3 of them want something simpler. We want to give them more direction. Set mechanics are designer direction. They say, well, if you don't know what makes a good build, just follow this and you'll have a decent build. Path of Exile doesn't put that in because they want to appeal to a smaller group of people. They want to appeal to the people who don't want to feel limited by this.
So I'm pretty sure Paladins is it might be probably the best ARPG.
Well, it's better for. Okay, so does it look nicer?
Yes.
Does it sound better?
I mean, it's all-
Right, like there are these aspects that people. Here's a super important one: are more of your friends playing it? Like, and this is really important if people when you look at how when we worry, and we do worry about people aren't playing new games because they're playing Fortnite or Roblox. For the player, if they go try a new game, are they playing that game with their friends anymore? Is it as good as the game that they can go back and hang out with their friends while they're playing? Like that is a big deal.
I think both games are very. You can play them both single player,
Mhm,
well, but having a friend powers your build, their build, and
mhm.
what you get out of that. But I really need music.
But I mean, it is free to play, so like they rely on being free to play means that you are aiming for a lot more players to try your game so that some will pay you. So that is a strategy that counters the fact that they're hardcore. Like
for learning curve.
Mhm.
They're so much similar. So
Another thing you can do for empowerment is give people choices that they can make. Uh, like choices about how the story goes or choices about the direction of the game. That can be dangerous because if it doesn't if a player wants something to go a certain way and they don't get that choice, like they've been conditioned to expect a choice, they will be conditioned to feel disappointed then if you fail to deliver on something. So the way that like BioWare has had in their story wrap-ups, they've had story like Mass Effect, people were really disappointed in the ending. It's because Mass Effect was promising all these changes and they couldn't deliver it to the level that people had been conditioned to expect by the end of it.
well, so you did you creatively
Mhm.
just they one of the things that they remind me of players that was that Marvel.
Yes, that's what you're doing. You are, although you, and actually you are paying to find people. You are paying to find people because the free to play games industry will talk about cost of user acquisition, which is basically how much we're spending on advertising divided by the number of players that come in. So you always end up with a like it costs $5 to get a new player, or it costs $20 to get a player that will pay us money.
And then kind of what is great, and then you can also say like maybe one of the things that the free to play game offers is not only they offer the player some better than others is they do give you not only are they in that they you have an opportunity to kind of explore that world, feel free, but they also empower the player to may have a greater opportunity through through paying for these other services.
That is a specific motivation. I wouldn't call that empowerment. So there's what we're gonna get to. Let me go back. I want to see the big chart. Okay. That gets a lot more into ownership. It can be a scarcity motivator as well. If this is something that you can get and others can't get.
Yeah, yeah, that's like oh, right.
Mhm. So when you think about the experience of playing Genshin Impact for free, they're not they're not driving a lot of scarcity play at the beginning. They're not motivating you by saying you can't get this unless you do these things. They're giving you a lot more of these intrinsic senses. Like a big reason why Genshin Impact is so popular is that they're really good at building like the player's epic meaning by giving them this world that they want to explore that feels meaningful to them by working a lot on the narrative and getting players invested in the narrative. Those are things that are not really about them asking for money. Those are things that players care about independently. And once they have done that and they built up such a strong intrinsic relationship with the players are super motivated just to play the game. That made it a lot easier for them to do what they sell, which is the selling new characters and stuff like that.
It's about using some of their so easy
Because a character, what is more motivating about a character? Which motivations does that hit?
well,
Yeah. Visual appeal is yeah. Um, this doesn't this doesn't really cover waifu motivations, unfortunately. That's the dark side of the motivation chart. In terms of ownership and possession, this is actually pretty straightforward. If you give people new things to own, so if they do purchase a character, it is something that they have that other characters don't necessarily that other players don't necessarily have. They have to be stuff that doesn't go away. If you're talking about consumables, that doesn't really satisfy a motivation to own things. When you talk about Pokemon and you want to collect them all, that definitely fits in there because you feel like you have this Pokemon and it will be yours. New characters, new equipment, long-term upgrades, cosmetics and stuff generally fit into there because a lot of what they are is a signal that this is yours.
Well, was one of them like a something out here where they had to see you like brings that use a whole bunch of stuff travel.
It's an interesting problem to solve because they do. That's where they said our game is most fun up to this point, so you have to be willing to do that. I think Diablo always lets you keep like I think you opt into their seasons, right? Yeah. So I think that's how they cover it. Um, well, so like if you build stuff in, I mean, it goes away in Fortnite, but so in Fortnite, building forts is more of an empowerment thing because you have creatively done something that maybe other players couldn't do. If you are doing it in a game like Minecraft or like in an MMO where you own a house, that can actually be a more intrinsic one. If it's less they paid you money to do it and more they express like in Minecraft, you express what you have built. Mhm, totally. Social influence. This one is also pretty easy to understand. It's your desire to have a human connection, to have to be important in how other people think of you. So extrinsically, it's stuff like high status items, expensive cosmetics. It is relate like the ownership motivator is the part of knowing that it's yours. The social motivator is the part where other people see it and they care about it. So this is where when we talk about character cosmetics and when they actually work as things that people will purchase, we usually say make sure that it's something that is visible to other players. Because if it's only something you see, you're only hitting the ownership side. But if it's both, you're hitting both motivators, and that'll be different for different people. Intrinsically rewarding stuff are going to be things that you are doing with other players that you care about. Yeah.
I'm just thinking, how do you balance certain different stuff so that, say, one person gating it doesn't necessarily
Hmm.
give you mostly someone your stories about maybe someone with a company and selling inflating is huge because
Yep.
that's the two.
Totally. So whether those things are scarce or not is going to drive how much it can be used to like rank against other people. I think social influence on its own is not always a negative sum. So something like Minecraft is a lot more positive sum, like players help each other. Building things that are more cooperative. Something like League of Legends, where uh, players get mad at other players really easily. That's not an extrinsic motivation. That is I want to be good for my team is an intrinsic social motivation. It just and that's kind of why it's put right here because it has a negative motivator of I don't want to be bad and it has a positive motivator of I want to be good and help my team. In terms of ranking as well, I mean, I think a lot of that is easier to talk about with scarcity because like there's also those MMOs that are designed of like one person can be king for a week, like if you win the server, or a lot more explicit player hierarchies. That is, you can be more explicit with that, or you can kind of hide it. Like you know how Overwatch hides the kill death ratio for other players. I thought they do, don't they? Doesn't Overwatch hide kill death? Yeah. No, no, hides it from other players on your team.
You're probably physically going to the profile and you're like, just have
You can see yourself, certainly. Hmm. Okay. Well, let's just say vaguely, I know that there are games that are more team-based make that harder to see because they want to promote more positive social motivations. And and diminish the negative social motivations because they think that's actually driving people away from the game.
7 years, and then they tell everybody
Oh yeah,
they want to.
similar to Path of Exile. I mean, Counter-Strike is, I think, both. It's positioned both as we are a more hardcore shooter, but it's also positioned as we are the world's shooter. Like, I think it has a very different positioning in the US versus where it has like in Europe and like worldwide. Interesting. Because Valorant,
There's a lot of kids about it.
interesting. But Valorant is also designed to be in certain ways more hardcore than CS:GO. It's
I think I'll have to like it.
but it's got like a lot of the movement tech from CS 1.6, doesn't it?
What do you think about it? Like, they reduced the gunplay
Okay.
in Valorant
Okay.
to have easier gunplay while having the abilities for
Okay.
sacrifice requirements of being a good shooter
Yeah.
to have abilities.
But they're still like miles away from like a hero shooter. Like it's still skill with shooting is still like 90%. Or it's more technically precise than most shooters, right?
She's a butt girl. With soft.
I think another interesting social motivator like this is the way that like Animal Crossing works, because you've got that sharing aspect. It's kind of similar to Minecraft. You invite people to your town, and then the extrinsic factors of that are where they can get new fruit. They might see NPCs that are in your town that they want. Like that's the look at this. This is on my town, or here's a specific thing that you get. But then the intrinsic part of is especially if you how the game encourages you to make custom textures and stuff. You can share that with your friends by them visiting you. Scarcity. We're kind of on the negative side right now. It could also be impatience because usually when we say scarcity, we're talking about both money resources and time resources. And also because most free-to-play games, especially now, will have time outs for people that seem reasonable but are still pushing most people to pay. Yeah.
So if you have a scarce item,
Uh-huh.
like some mythic raid gear,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
mythic raid plus like you have to get certain type of gear to make your character
Sure.
know better.
Sure.
That's the level of scarcity. You can also kind of power to making your character.
Yeah. So when we're talking about mechanics or pieces of content, they can hit, and we kind of want them to hit multiple of these areas. But when we're talking about why they are effective, we want to break it down into the individual motivating factors that we can. So we can understand like, oh, the mythic raid gear is hitting empowerment because it's an extrinsic motivator for empowerment because your character is going to be much more powerful for having it. It's also a scarcity motivator because say it's uh you want to be day one clear. You want to be day one clear on a raid. Day one clear is kind of a scarcity thing because if you don't do it in that first day, it's gone forever. And that's why when games start doing, they'll start tagging stuff, won't they? If you do day one clear raid, you'll get like an achievement or something like that.
You gotta be tiger.
Sure,
I think some cases certain get else, but I think
sure. So if they're giving you a reward for that, that's scarcity because you know if you don't do that on that day, you will never be able to get it again. That's giving you accomplishment because you know that you did this thing that not everybody could do. And if it's power that you're getting early, like you're one of the first people to have the most powerful tier of gear, you're also getting player empowerment. On this side, when we talk about titles and limited time events, these have an intrinsic side because they are that kind of hits in the player satisfaction of getting it. And this is just the proof to others that you can do it is the real extrinsic part. Okay, unpredictability and novelty is our desire for unexpected things to happen. It's the fun of hitting the jackpot, which is also, of course, a scarcity thing. It's the when it's extrinsic, a lot of it is like Skinner box type stuff. So it's opening a pack and seeing what you get while you're wanting something specifically. Even stuff I would say like critical hits. If you Some games can use critical hits as a player kind of leveler. If you think about like if you think about a lot of board games where there are things where if you roll doubles, you get a big bonus. That's really similar to a critical hit, and it's in a lot of board games because for kids it's a leveling mechanic. If you think about item drops in Mario Kart, it kind of works like this too. Yeah, totally. I mean, the blue shell is it doesn't work very well as empowerment. They want to sell it as empowering, but it doesn't do much for that player. Like I'd say the lightning bolt does a lot more for player empowerment, but also especially for a kid who doesn't really understand how the item tables work in Mario Kart, it feels like you just got that. Right. And that's where because Mario Kart is zero because it's competitive to a certain amount, that's where it can be hard to give somebody an empowering thing without it being disempowering for another player. The lightning bolt, yeah, totally, yeah. Well, and like I think their design for the lightning bolt was to avoid that. But I think do they even have the lightning bolt still, or did they move away from it? Okay, I think they're more cautious with that because while it is more fair overall, it makes the game kind of boring for everybody else for a while. Hmm. Yeah, that's what they ended up doing and that builds empowerment for the top end. But if they make it as they tune the difficulty, they can say that it doesn't affect, like it still is effective most of the time. So for most cases, it is a net positive. That's what Gavin was saying. Yeah. Oh. Well, so I would think of it as a knob that they are tuning. Think of the experience from both ends. So on the end of the player who got the blue shell, who's probably not doing very good, well, who almost by definition is not doing very well, if they do it and it doesn't work, they will feel like they didn't get the thing that they earned. Um, by the same token, if the player in first uh, feels like that wasn't fair, they will also feel like that was an unfair thing. But what Nintendo is believing is that as the player in first, you already know how to play the game. You know that this happens to you, and you have tools to deal with it in a way that the players like in the back don't. So if it hits you, you as the player in first are going to be more likely to go, I know that this happens. I know that by moving back, I actually have a decent chance to get back in first. I know I will be given tools for this. And then when they give you an out, like having a certain item save, I think of those things as based on how they tune it. So if they tuned it to be pretty generous, then, like I said, it would kind of weaken for the bad players, but it would be an expected play. You would feel bad if you didn't pull it off. When they tune it to be really, really hard to do, they are giving you a psychological out so that you feel like it was more your fault. Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I learned that in a racing game. I think it was Project Gotham Racing 3, and I was like playing against my brother, and I had played a bunch, he'd played a bit, and I realized that I was 30% better and that we couldn't play with each other at all. Like, probably. On the intrinsic side of this, things that can pop up in your game and surprise people are totally valid. And I feel like these are actually a lot. These kind of feel more like the top half of this bar. And it depends on how the player feels about it. With roguelike stuff, if you have a player who is conditioned to think of new things happening with joy rather than fear, then that feels great. Um, Stuff like when you get new features. If it's like an old style shooter that drops new weapons every few levels, that is going to be a novel experience. And if the player becomes conditioned to expect, I know at some point I'll see something new, I'm motivated to keep playing because I don't know what I'll get. Totally. Yeah, I'm just trying to think about in terms of in order for it to be motivation, the player has to have an understanding of what to expect. Like if it is totally surprising, it's not motivating. It might be something where in the past it was cool, so they're kind of hoping that it will happen in the future. Um, but you do generally, if you have something that will be awesome but nobody knows about it, it's not very communicative, people. Okay. Loss and avoidance. Um, okay. So a lot of these are playing on people's disappointment. In terms of extrinsic motivators, this can kind of get really nasty. Um, if you say, here's a thing, but if you don't invest the time or you don't invest the money, we will then take it away from you. That can be a lot stronger than saying you will have this if you do this. People generally rate avoiding loss higher than they rate gaining new things. So a lot of games will play off of that. When you think about the way that battle presses are presented, a lot of the ways that they're psychologically sticky and that people notice are that they will show you making progress and show you how far you are from the end of it when they're about to expire. So they will say, if you do pay, you will have finished this, and they will do as much as they can to present it as though you have already earned it, and you will lose it if you don't. Um, on the other hand, I think there are, and though the way this was originally designed, it didn't have an intrinsic side of it. I think there are good. I'm trying to think if this is intrinsic or extrinsic, but there are loss mechanisms that aren't monetized that I think are pretty interesting. When you think about the way that a Souls game presents itself, or a corpse run in an MMO, especially in a Souls game, because there's not monetization around it, you are presented with the idea that you will enjoy the game more if you are terrified of losing things on the way back. And because the game is so bare, you have no choice but to go, well, I guess it's for my own good and it's fine. Something like a survival horror game where your resources are super limited and they're always running out is going to use this. And this is kind of a negative motivator. You will feel bad, but feeling bad is one of their aesthetic goals. So when you think about the mechanics design or mechanics dynamics aesthetics lens, we think about we're making a horror game and we want an aesthetic of players um, feeling like they're starved, feeling like they're afraid of things. You can use negative motivators to do that. And that's a context where you're like, this is actually strengthening my game in a way that people will like rather than in a way that is effective, but maybe people will dislike in the end. So if we want to do this and either analyze another game or kind of look at a game that we're making and kind of judge whether we want to push more motivation, a good way to do it is to this is why it's eight-sided, because we can take a chart like this and then rate how strong we think it is in each aspect. And once we've done that, we can do things like this actually maps to the Bartle player type taxonomy. You know, the killers, socializers, explorers, achievers, different things that people are motivated to do. And it also maps to the player's development stage of the game. So this is about how long the player has been playing the game. And this is about what type of stuff the player is motivated at. So you can imagine a killer who is motivated to be better than other players and prove that they're better than other players is motivated by the fear of losing things and the desire to like own things in the beginning. By the end of the game, they're moving closer to the social side and they're moving towards they care about empowerment because they care about things that will they're actually they have achieved their goal of knowing how to kill other players. And by this point, they want to optimize it and they want to do it socially. So they are moving more towards wanting that sort of motivation. Does that make sense? It's kind of weird and this is actually way too small to read. The reason that the explorers move into the loss at the end is because in the beginning when they want to discover new things, they're motivated by getting power in order to do that, the social motivation of being able to share that with other people, the unpredictability of seeing new things. By the end of it, once they've seen everything, they become more loss motivated. That is all I have on this. So we can talk about that for a while, or we can take like a 10-minute break. Sounds good. Why not? Stop it. They will notice. How you doing? Did you accomplish your goals? Return. Oh, I see. I have no desire to do that. What? Good job. Good job. You could. Uh-huh. I thought that was your goal. Hmm? I'm not making you do it. Yeah, it'll be good. I'm excited to tell them that I can't make stand up, but I will be there at like 7:30, and then I'll be there until 2 in the morning. So because 17-bit is in Japan, so 17-bit where I work, they're in Kyoto. So I'm not in Kyoto. So when their 10 a.m. stand-up happens, it's either 5 or 6 p.m. And they work till 7 p.m. So I stay up until like 2 in the morning. It's kind of annoying. It won't be too late. Yeah, I'm just not gonna do stand-up. I'll come in and I'll say, hey guys, this is what we're doing. Yeah, I mean, I think I like to hold my personal feelings in a game as like a thing that I can analyze from a design perspective. So I'm like, I love this game. And then I want to think about like, if this is a person playtesting, why do they love it? Like, let's ask them. Ask them what's good about it from a more neutral perspective. So like,
Yeah. That's like a quarter. Counting. How long? More. Yeah. I remember.
Yeah, I mean, 30, that's it. Your skin dries up. You have to subsist on other fluids to keep it on going. That's a cool shirt. Oh, that's cool. Cool. Yeah. I mean, is that in September normally? Okay. It's still pretty darn hot in Japan.
That's pretty mainstream. XP Game Summit in Toronto.
Yeah.
Any good?
I haven't been. Um,
Cigarette. I feel like you talked about it yesterday.
we talked about it, but I didn't talk about it.
You got name dropped. Does that one know any good?
Which one?
Cigarette.
SIGGRAPH is good if you are working on graphics. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say that it doesn't go in. Generally, he's gonna he wants to send himself a cigar with
Yeah, SIGGRAPH is like, you get white papers on graphics at GDC. SIGGRAPH is all white papers, and it's not just real-time graphics, it's like offline rendering as well.
Explain some of some of her networking and it's what are the well, yeah, that's really the one the that's and 1 day thing. The incident, it's what 2 to 3 day thing. It's Thursday night. Yeah. Didn't you say that you saw it all Sunday? That was the you. Yes, no, actually, so that's the I mean, the last shit I think it's invisible that yeah. No, the one for first.
Let's see.
That is scheduled for once. I sort of doing the round of the ball.
Got- Okay, so yeah, this is like mid-size. Devolver. That's who I was trying to think of last time. Okay. I think XP Game Summit is because of its size is probably easier to talk to people at. It's easier to talk to people from studios at. You're going to be more likely to get Montreal and Toronto-based studios, and like be able to talk to people who work there. Like,
Cool. So I think that's fun for them. Why not?
yeah, and like in terms of actually building either like connections that'll be useful or even like partnerships with your school, I think that's going to be a lot more useful than something like Tokyo Game Show. They're going to say like, that's cool.
And I really think people have been off when
Totally, totally.
2 months that I've been so far.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I think like a lot of Canada located like,
So sure. Yeah. Although that's I don't know if yeah. Doesn't matter. Someone outside of himself needs to help, needs to also be involved. Starting doing the computer? Yes. We don't call. So, he won't do it. He was some with his own.
but I think a lot of like Canada specific conferences and festivals have a specific remit to like nurture Canadian organizations as well. So I think that's also really beneficial.
So I was I specifically was really pushing for XP Games though because It's the largest Canadian specific
Yeah.
game.
And like they will, I think when you talk to people like at companies there and you say we are from Canada, that is a plus in a way that's not like a plus at GDC.
They go, saying we're from Canada is a not agency. That's interesting. But also it's like it's just because they're not
Well, I know it'll be a little bit harder to get you down or anything like that. Yeah.
easily. It's just like
Yeah.
yeah.
Like it's not necessarily gonna stop it, but they know that it just means work for them. Like,
Okay. I had someone go, I am so sorry. It's caused a 20-minute conversation that just wasn't.
they know
It's like I have
what.
I actually had to correct all of these things. So like, oh man, like half the country over, I had to be like, no, like,
I mean, it's really crazy how much like, and I think there is like just saying there's a big gap between certain like political agents and a bunch of
it's, yeah. And Jerry's, back then, Jerry's sad about talk about who we should have been shipped on board.
I saw a guy. I mean, it was like one of those old rural guys, but when I was at the Jamaican kitchen, there was like an old guy. He's got like a cowboy hat, and he's got his iPad with like a Trump sticker on it. I was like, wow. Yeah. It's on the north side. Oh, it's so good. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. Okay. Yeah, somebody was saying that they opened another one and then they closed it after a while. Okay. I thought it was awesome because I got like Jamaican stuff for breakfast where it was like the pork and the chicken and the potatoes like in a cast iron skillet with like the eggs on top. And oh, it's so good. I like I think spicy stuff with coffee. It's really good.
So it's like,
I guess I should probably.
we're not too, avoid putting, like, I'm shout. Uh, yeah.
Almost everybody now. Do you want to get started again? Ready for war. Oh.
It's a very, I started about 40. So,
Uh, it'd be a Genshin Impact version of God of War. Probably would be. Probably. Totally.
he died because of life experience. Third son.
Right. Synergy mapping is a tool that we can use to understand games. This is another design lens. Um, I want to talk to you guys about it because I actually have some data questions because I'm trying to make this tool better. And I think what I'm thinking might make sense, but it might be stupid. But I don't work on a lot of software stuff. So this specifically is a tool to analyze connections between mechanics in games. Um, we specifically can use it when once we've mapped out a game and understood it like this, sometimes it will help us find things that already exist in our game that we can codify as a mechanic that we might want to give a name to. Uh, the main thing that you're going to be doing with this is mapping connections between the contents. You understand which things are highly interdependent, which things are going to generate a bunch of combos, and which things are kind of isolated. Um, once we find those, once we have find those, we will have found content that is going to play well together, and that can affect how we want to build more content in the future as well, kind of to play with that mechanic. And like I said, if something is pretty empty, it can be something that needs more investment in, or maybe we need to cut it. I like to use this when you're looking at expanding content. So if you have something like, here's a game that's been around for a while, we need to do more content, or we're getting close to the end, it feels kind of shallow and not very deep. Doing this can say, okay, I can see why this side of the game doesn't have a lot of connections. Or if you're doing it on an existing game and you want to add new stuff, you can say, I can see how there aren't very many connections between this type of mechanic and this other part of the game. When you're building a new mechanic, if you want it to play well with existing stuff, you're going to want to make sure that it has a bunch of strong synergies with the existing stuff that you have. And it can also be useful for when you're analyzing something, because if you want to understand what makes a game interesting and it has a lot of depth, then understanding what the connections are between the pieces is really nice. Or if you are a player and you want to figure out what's powerful, you can use this to discover builds. If we start with a mechanic as an example, so something like lifesteal. Lifesteal I'm using lifesteal because it's pretty much the same in most games. Um, we can do this on either a mechanic or a piece of content. I'm going to show you how to do it on both. But I would do the mechanics for a game before you do the content, because having identified the mechanics is what you're going to use to map out the content. In this case, I'm specifically going to be doing lifesteal. So what I want to start with is like, if this is a game mechanic, what other game mechanics is it affecting? You know? So can you guys give me what lifesteal pulls off of? Yeah. So damage. So what is the way that that interacts? We can if we did it even simpler. What happens when damage goes up? What happens when damage goes up? Yeah, something like that. hmm hmm Sure. So if we had specific custom mechanics, I think I'm just gonna call this a custom mechanic, because this doesn't there's not something like this in Magic explicitly, but if it did exist, we would totally map it on there. If you think about a game like Magic the Gathering, like a card game, and you're talking about lifesteal, can you think of another breakdown of a mechanic that lifesteal affects? Hmm? Yeah. How does sacrifice interact with lifesteal? hmm So that would be no. This is actually interesting. I'm going to map that on the other side. So I think what I want to say is I want to draw these arrows as one directional, because this is something that is affected by this. So your life is affected by lifesteal. Oh, I did LF. But lifesteal doesn't, it's not a mechanic. Uh, the lifesteal that you're doing is not affected by your current life, if that makes sense. Like when you use lifesteal, you're not like, well, if I have 10 life, it's going to do something different. When you're using lifesteal, the lifesteal itself will change because of the damage that you're doing. Another one that I'd want to put on is on hit effects. Yeah. And things that can trigger unhit effects or block them or modify them are going to affect lifesteal. Another one that I would add is lifesteal. because lifesteal doubling it up is actually going to affect it.
It's still the spicy.
Um,
More
it's more like, yeah, yeah. So once you've done that and you kind of are connecting it to the mechanics, we can start doing it as a second order thing. So when we talk about your attack damage is changed by your critical hits that you're getting. And while I wouldn't connect critical hits directly to lifesteal, it is connected through the route of increasing your attack damage, which is thus going to increase your lifesteal. Uh, in a game, I guess this is more generic than Magic. You don't really have attack speed. In a game like an MMO, where you're changing your attack speed, or like League, changing your attack speed will change your basic attack damage and thus change your lifesteal. Changing the on-hit effects you get is also going to be affected by your attack speed and your attack power. So we can do this and kind of extend it out through all the mechanics of the game. And once we have done that, we have a map to know that kind of helps us explicitly see that like crit rate is a really isolated mechanic and it's really far down. It's going to be both harder for players to understand how that will affect something like their basic damage output, and it's going to be harder for them to build a solid connection between that and something like lifesteal because it's farther away, but that will also suggest possibilities for more subtle combinations that players kind of have to discover. One thing that I have noticed, and this kind of gets in my problem with this, is that this type of visualization, you'll see this as I map it to content, does kind of have a starting point for it. Like if we map too many things, we're going to start wanting to cross lines on this. So we might want to start with one, build it as far as we go, and say this is the lifesteal view of the mechanics. Do another map for this is the on enter the battlefield view, and these are the mechanics that enter the battlefield is affected by. Because enter the battlefield is going, we know it's going to be pretty far away from lifesteal. It's not really affected by that very often, so we kind of need a different view into that. Okay, once we've mapped a bunch of the mechanics, we can start mapping our content itself. So we can break content. Most content, especially in games like Magic or a game with like stat blocks like League of Legends. But you can also do this to something like Portal. You can break down the mechanics in that way because with Portal, you need to understand in what order you're teaching all the different skills. It just happens to be a pretty simple map because it all goes in one direction. And Magic is that's a game where we want these pieces to connect as much as possible because that's what gives us the depth. We want cards that are richly connected. This card is insanely richly connected, which is why it's pulled out here because it does it interacts with so many things in this game. There are two steps. So with the mechanics, that was kind of a one-step process. We were mapping it to the other mechanics that it's affected by. But with the content, we have two steps to do. First, we're going to write down the mechanics that it is so that other things can trigger off of. And then we're going to write down the mechanics that it is is affected by. So what from this card is affected by these other mechanics and therefore these other cards. Exactly. So for what this guy is, yeah, he's red white. He is a human and a clown, like his type, which is human type, clown type. What else? Totally, he's a creature. He's a legendary too, and that might matter. Really, there are things that key off of what your power is. Yeah, totally. Uh-huh. Yep, things key off of haste. Absolutely.
You're right. We're dumb.
What else? I can think of. Okay, I think we can do the toughness one too. I think that's a good one to isolate because there are things where, like, if you think of cards that deal damage to everything, uh, like deal one damage to every creature. We know that this guy's going to be good for that because he's going to survive. And then if we think of tokens, creating tokens is the thing that we care about. So if we need something that makes tokens, this guy's good. By the way, tell me about this guy right now. What does he do?
Next version. Here's the it's very quick up here.
Mhm.
For the single child. Just create the duplicate one of guys. Usually you want to trigger like ETVs, I think.
Yeah, because that's kind of what we're going to get into next. Um, yeah, no, he's the weird thing about Magic is that they've decided that every card has to have at least this much text nowadays. So the whole cards are really complicated these days. Uh, but
Like functionally, that's not that complicated. Like I know it's like once per turn, tap it, spawn a token.
mhm.
Functionally, he's useless to attack with, but you can tap it and it exists and does.
He's not useless because he's got flying and haste. Yeah, but that counts over time. I mean, it's only because you tap him that takes a lot of that away, and you pay one. But so yeah, this list that we built for what he is for other stuff plugging into this. The next thing we want to do is find the stuff that this plugs into. So these are the mechanics that it's going to use, the things that it cares about, and the things that it acts on. Uh, Again, it's not what it reacts to, it's what it acts towards. So what do you think those are? What's that? Okay, so well, it's not allies, is it? No, it is ally creatures. So you definitely, this is going to be a hard one because so many things are creatures. Like we can totally write that down. I just think we won't get a ton of juice out of being like point to every creature in the deck. What else?
Things other creatures that are not scholar, helm, stuffs.
Right. Let's break that down more specifically.
Instead of ones that have when they do damage.
When they deal damage. So on take damage, on hit. Sure. How would we distinguish on? Because normally, if I wrote down on hit, I would assume it's this effect happens when a character hits something. How about on take damage? Yep. Yeah, let's do on damage shot. That's good. Yep. Totally. Totally. Yeah, so on take damage is it's weaker, like because it's flying. It's a little the creature that takes. Yeah, I think that's actually going to be really important. I think sacrifice is really important as well. What else? Totally. So like that's the mechanic that we want to link to is sacrifice or on death. Either of those are going to totally work with this guy. What else? What's that? Does this guy care about red type?
No, but the
I think that's an is side. And it's kind of doubled. Like he is red, and then he's going to create a bunch of red stuff. So well, let me think here. If you have an enchantment that buffs red, he would care about it. Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah, he would be stronger with like all red creatures. He wouldn't be stronger with all red creatures have haste, but he would be stronger with all red creatures have +1/+0. Yeah, totally. What else? Mhm. I think so. And if you have stuff that is stuff that triggers off of haste. Like if it's like whenever you play a haste, whenever a haste creature enters or all hasted creatures get, I think it'd be good.
Just this character is quickly. Oh, you can get it on other.
I think, yeah, I think in some games it would be, yeah. So what they would do, yeah, this is a weird bit of magic. So this all it's doing is saying that this ability has a restriction. So this is a creature, an activated creature ability. We could write down activated creature abilities.
We'll walk back and go.
Yeah,
Spawn on the wall, grab it back, just die.
but
Is that
I think when you talk about that, and that specifically, there's a subset of on deal damage that is on player damage because this makes guys that are real easy to damage other players. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. I think also create token is a big one. So this is
there's like token
totally,
colors.
totally. Let me see if I have anything else. Yeah, we should probably write down the balloon type. We wrote down the red type. That'd be good. Although I have a feeling there aren't a ton of things that trigger off of balloon type cards. Um,
Also goes.
yeah. It is. Um,
Makes sense. That's more.
no, I mean so he looks at your face and then he says, "Watch this," and he makes a copy of your face and pops it. Yeah. I think also Power Lesson 2 is what it wants to play off of too. Because it's going to create one power stuff, and if you have stuff that's boosting those, this guy will care about that too.
Sure, that does pick up hand.
Well, because it can't take copies, I guess it would die immediately.
I think it's actually so if player reading shoes, you can trigger the bad trigger on upstairs.
Yeah.
It's a little you just assume that but wow.
Did we get? I don't think I got Enter the Battlefield on here. Yeah, totally. So Enter the Battlefield is when this character shows up, this happens. So this guy's going to trigger that as well.
But not cast.
Right. Yeah. I guess flying. I didn't write down flying. Flying is big. Evasion and fodder. Fodder is a more nebulous one. Sometimes this is like, so creating fodder. This is not a called out game mechanic. One of the things that we have to do is look at, um, sometimes we have to look at things that are a little bit bigger than uh, a specific rule interaction and look at something that's more of a play type. So fodder is kind of the concept of having guys that you can sacrifice when you're attacking because they're gonna take the hit. Yeah, but like having guys to draw heat away from other creatures that are attacking. Like I think it's a useful concept, although it's kind of hard to define. So for mechanics, I would really say it's about ooh, things that players care about, and they'll usually create their own language. Like fodder is not, yeah, chump. It's like it's not the reason that word was created is because it's a concept that matters. It's not necessarily something that Wizards ever wrote down, but it mattered to the game, so people identified it themselves and made it. Okay. So the next thing you want to do is look at the content that this acts on. This is actually an arrow that goes towards this. So because this guy creates red balloon guys that then get sacrificed, this is a spell that you can play that forces you to sacrifice a creature. So if you are creating easy creatures that you know are going to die anyway, you can cast a spell on them and you get a really good damage spell. It will deal 5 damage to a target creature. It has a little bit of a, this is kind of a strengthen and a minimize on that. It avoids the graveyard, which is a big deal in Magic. So what we've done is we've started putting cards that this guy will get stronger by playing with. It makes sense. Here's a white one that is going to play off into the battlefield. So when this guy makes a copy of this guy, it's going to get +2/+4. So if we play this guy, we have, or no, it's going to create a 1/1 red balloon that can give somebody else +2/+4. So every turn you're getting a bonus like that to give to somebody. That's going to be pretty sweet. Um, we started with red and white because those are also easiest to do. That's just easy for your search, but you're going to kind of want to go through everything. And so if I were to go through, in Magic, we've got the 5 colors. If I were to start looking at green and blue and black, it's it's not a direct mechanical link in this sense, but you know that it's farther away. If you're talking about a game like League of Legends and you're looking at character matchups, for instance, character synergies, and you're looking at a jungler and you're mapping it to other junglers, like you know that's not super important, but you kind of want to get that so that you know, and that's how they built some of their like cross type characters, like the junglers that are good at co-op. You can see how they would map it by going like, well, he's got all these connections with this, so this is going to make a strong character for that. The other super important thing is that these can be in multiple categories. So this guy plays well with tokens, and this guy makes tokens. So we kind of are mapping this guy twice in our buckets. And in terms of how these two interact, like when you're mapping it like this, you're like, well, I've got two lines going to this guy. He's got two different mechanical synergies that are going on. I would consider that as that makes that is a stronger pairing that has more power, probably. Like you still need to analyze it yourself, but it's probably a stronger pairing than it would otherwise be. So then we kind of keep sorting through content. So in this case, I've kind of gone through the set and mapped all the stuff that hits ETB together. So I know that these red ones are going to be likely pairs and the white ones as well. And these are actually all red and white. So these are the most likely ones to be played with this guy. Um, Sacrifice. Okay. Well, I have fewer cards that require the sacrifice mechanic, so that vein is less impactful to me. Like I know that players are going to see this enter the battlefield comboing with the Balloon Man more often. It's a more common synergy than the sacrifice synergy.
Is that like a word for knowing that that's because sacrifice is going to be red black, for example, rather than ETB, which is sort of small, like ubiquitous
Sure.
meta knowledge?
Yeah, there's the player's knowledge about the game. Um, yeah, I think you can map that into a lot of concepts of player skill. Like they do in Magic, they expect players to learn about what is in the set. They know that kind of, if I'm mapping, wow, this is me, this is all me. Um, if I'm mapping player skill, like this is the most skilled player and this is the least skilled player, then I'm kind of expecting meta knowledge to only start showing up at around the 60th, 70th percentile. But they're still designing for that. Like and especially because of the way that this game works, it kind of depends on your game. Magic is designed to be played in certain ways, and that those are different lenses that they have to use when they design it. With Magic, they think about their game from the perspective of I am looking at all cards that were ever printed and putting a deck together. They look at it from the perspective of I'm only looking at cards that were printed in the last year and putting it together. Yep. And then with this exercise is done from a set perspective, and this is also from a perspective of this is really useful for like a limited or kind of drafting scenario where you are thinking about what you're likely to see as you're going through just a small number of cards. This exercise becomes much more difficult the more that you want to broaden the perspective. Yeah, I mean, you're like, what you doing design? Oh, we play Magic. What's important? It's great game designing. See, it always is. Um, so yeah, this is also keep in mind that this is kind of from the perspective of the Jolly Balloon Man. So, like when we were talking about mechanics, it can be useful to extend it to a second order effect. So, on death is not something I did write it down. I shouldn't write it down because it's the Jolly Balloon Man. No, this is a mistake. So the Jolly Balloon Man made a copy of this guy. When this guy dies, create a treasure. You get some. It stores mana for later. If he made a copy of the piggy bank, that piggy bank would get sacrificed and create a treasure token. So he does actually have a direct connection. This is so what this should actually be. I did this a little bit wrong, but this should actually be both the Jolly Balloon Man connects to this, and then this guy connects through Undeath to this. Because yeah.
So when you're looking at doing this magic further,
Hmm.
then you can draw a smooth line like you're saying, trail bar, just that's exactly what's happening then. Like go through the balance and most like from your main card to like it instead of this and then what's
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. If I go from this to this, right? So in this case, here's Betrayer's Bargain, which is a sacrifice, and here's the Undeath. And I feel like I should properly also connect this. And then I should have a this is what's difficult about this visualization. So this we could if we were to draw every card connecting to every other card, we couldn't it's like a multi-dimensional stack. We couldn't actually fit it on this. So this helped us a lot to analyze this guy, and it helps us to kind of understand there's still a lot of information in this about, well, these are all sacrifice cards. So if we treat this as a mechanics block, it becomes much easier to connect it to that. And we can kind of go, all the sacrifice cards, we know sacrifice connects with undeath. Uh, Maybe with tokens and fodder, although I don't think it's a direct mechanical connection. Um, but that also can tell us specific things about like there are so many enter the battlefield effects that it is very likely that players will see this and be able to capitalize on it. It is also very likely that these are more likely to become too strong because they're easy to trigger on attack. For instance, we can make tokens that we don't care about that are attacking and that are getting a bunch of attacks. So if there are effects that are too good for attacking, that can be really bad. Or if we're the player, we can think that that's actually really nice to do for ourselves. What we aren't mapping, another thing we're not mapping is what acts on Jolly Balloon Man. So things that act on white creatures, we're not actually seeing in this mapping. So like I said, for players, it can be really useful to find specific things to create new builds. For designers, understanding how your mechanics specifically interact with each other, how your content is laid out and is supporting that, how likely players are to see those interactions. Sometimes it can be really useful to have a low, like a poorly connected mechanic or piece of content because that a lot of times it's used as a signal to players that something is really strong and it's kind of dangerous to connect it to other things. So making something kind of unsupported and not able to combo, it's either bad or it's really strong and it's actually scary. When we talk about how many connections there are between things, think as well about the player's experience of that. This is something that says there's a lot that you can discover that this works well with, and therefore a lot more skill that you can express. You can be better at this game by figuring these things out. That might not be the game that you want. When you think about some card games like the Pokemon card game, they don't necessarily want their skill gap between the best and the worst players to be as big as Magic. So they want to keep some of their combos in check. They want players to care about like the art of the cards and the collectability in a much bigger way than Magic does. And when you've built some maps like this, in terms of ways that you can analyze it, if you are one simple thing you can do by just counting the numbers of links between either the mechanics or the pieces of content, that can just quickly help you find things that are getting more than the average or less than the average number of connections. Um, like I said, you can find builds as a result of this, or find things that you didn't think were necessarily dangerous, but actually are. A lot of the stuff that has broken card games on accident have been cards that were useful in too many decks or too many builds at the same time. Yeah. So, and a lot of times what'll happen with when you're designing a content, you might have a few scenarios in mind that you're going, it'll be pretty good in these, and maybe you've balanced it for that. You might not have mapped it to other things that then create something totally untenable for the game. That works the other way, of course. Something that you think is good, but has no reason to get played in any other deck or in any other build can be a problem. You just, it doesn't grow as much as you had hoped it would. Um, and finally, for like, especially for anything where players are sharing resources, like any game where players are bidding for the same pool, or in a drafting game like Magic, or I mean, even in a game like League, you're drafting for characters. If something has a lot of connections, it might be something that everybody needs to have. It might be that might be a problem if people feel resentful that, well, somebody needs to take this because we don't work without it. Or it might create scarcity problems where somebody will get it and it will feel random, and everybody else will feel like they can't compete because they never found that. Yeah, I mean, that's such a straightforward connection because they design the games that, because we could, if we mapped out a hero in like Overwatch, or a support hero, we could map out the mechanics that it's interacting with, and therefore which hero characters it has the most synergistic mappings with. And that would also kind of tell us that this support might play best with these like 5 heroes. Totally, absolutely. Um, I think the super straightforward, they've said your team needs a support. I mean, I think of the way that they guarantee that you need a support, and I like a lot of that is, well, most supports have healing, and healing is a thing that you need. So so they just put a mechanic that every team needs into every support to do that. So like I said, this has a complexity limit to the way that I've mapped it out, which is what I'm kind of hoping to go beyond. So um, I was using Miro, which is that like online. It's one of the online whiteboarding softwares, and it has an infinite canvas size, so you can get really big with it. Like you can store um, hundreds of these on a single page and just swipe between them. That can solve it to a certain extent. I'm I'm kind of wondering if the best way to represent this is in a graph database. So because I think this is strictly a relationship that can be represented in a graph. Nodes, edges, and nodes. This is just 3 nodes right here. So a content, a relationship, and another piece of content. The balloon man cares about sacrifice. And then if we go red, white, or if we go balloon man is red, white, that's another graph relationship. The trader's bargain is sacrifice. This should go the other way. That should allow us to create a query into that graph database that if we say map everything, the query would be from balloon man map everything that it cares about. Like that's a very simple database query. I think I understand that totally. I don't know how you would do the two-stage query of map everything that balloon man cares about and map everything that every one of those things cares about. And a lot of the graph visualizers, because this is kind of the problem that people are solving with this, are about huge data sets that you kind of need to craft a query for a bunch of different views. I think this is the way to go, but I don't have enough experience with these to know exactly what to pick. So that was kind of what I was wondering. Do you guys actually work? Have you done like database stuff and graph stuff? Yeah. And-
From a databases perspective, that's absolutely the correct approach. Is making subgraphs or views
Okay.
for everything that you can generate dynamically with like a written query.
Okay.
Because you don't want to see the
Right.
subgraph.
But I mean, I do. I can't. I don't have enough eyes for that.
Described is possible and not uncommon, and
Yeah.
like like SQL or like a variety of different database models or visualization tools.
Okay. Do you always, what is the actual interface to add the content in the first place?
Text. I think it has variables. So some people use a tool to edit like a CSV file, and
So
some
like
people
I
use
could do it. It's just like I could do it as CSVs that we're editing in like a spreadsheet, but I'm not sure if that's going to get really unmanageable when you have to map these things twice in that way. Mm.
something. Does it export?
Yeah, I mean, of course, spreadsheet software exports. I spend a lot of my time, like most of my design tools that I make myself are about manipulating data that I've worked on in a spreadsheet and then exporting that and like rebuilding it in Python in a format that something else can eat, basically. Um, okay. I mean, I think you can even export Excel and JSON if you want.
JSON thing, whereas if each thing is a data feed, but you have like a list of things
Huh.
that's not something you should be able to link video.
Oh, you mean like a structured? Well, JSON is structured. So JSON, with JSON, you would have uh, it'd be two arrays, right? It'd be an array of relationship types, and within that, an array of connections, like or other content, right?
So if you do that, things like Firebase and stuff like that.
And so like your content would be like JBM, and then in here we have ETB, and then under ETB there's something like card one, card two, card three,
Part of that, yeah.
something like that. But that's not the format that a graph database would expect. Hmm. So I want to say that this has been useful for us to pick apart games and like build their tech trees and stuff. But I think it could be a lot better.
As it stands, is that when people do this, so they just do it by hand typically?
Yep. And you still need to have like the decision making, uh, especially like some of like these judgments. It kind of takes.
Yeah, we're gonna make points to indicate like priority or like significance of each of these attributes so that when you're trying to visualize a big mess, you could say like take the top five most important attributes. Because those are really subjective, but like that would clean it up, I guess, in like partial views.
I don't think that would. I think that would be a problem in two ways. I think you might have judged what you think are the most important and you missed things because of that when kind of what you're trying to find out is things that you didn't know. I think so, yeah.
At least with magic, typically you pull everything that's useful and you probably just break it down to like the color scheme itself, and everything else like you did, right?
Yeah, this is just red.
That
Yeah.
four color decks, five color decks are
Yeah, that I guess that would exist inside of the. That's not suggested by this. That's just a decision that was made as the content was mapped out because it's practical. I guess if you had actually mapped everything, it would be a rule that you append to your views, right? You'd be like, well, and don't show me outside of red and white, or don't show me outside of the colors on this card. Hmm. But on the other hand, say it was just red. What you need to decide is, and you want to look at it and see like what colors it pairs with and how many synergies it has. You still want to see connections to each color of magic.
Make the decision whether or not like have their colors.
Yeah, totally. Or whether, as a designer, you've made a card that you unanticipated is going to break a color that you don't normally see it paired with.
Even green could have benefits from sacrifices. They spawn tokens the most.
Yeah,
See that. I can kind of see that. So in all with this sort of thing, hypothetic, just ignoring John Greenman himself, but like, say you created a magic card, right? You set stated and you
mhm,
the card on, okay, what does this interact with effect?
yep,
So you literally just like putting the card in and you're like, oh, this has 40 interactions on it.
totally.
Let's pull back
Yeah,
those
yeah.
keywords.
And like, it's already worth the time it takes to do that by hand.
For John Greenman, you're like, oh, you know, the flying is giving us advantage, much as giving us on player hit
Yeah,
hypothetically.
yeah,
Let's give it a match. This is we made it too strong.
yep, yep.
Or let's
Right. So this is the part that I don't fully understand when they're designing this card, and they're like, well, also they should have flying. Uh, also,
that's hand that has the fact that it's a poem, right? No,
yeah, yeah, I know. That's the part where I feel like there's a lot of weird stuff in Magic in the past like year where they feel rushed because it feels like they're missing some of these things, and you're like, wait, why did you need that many effects on this? You were fine already.
this doesn't have anything that's heard from any other players.
Yeah.
Why bother doing this flying? You're not getting flying. If you don't,
Mhm,
there's the
mhm,
I said there.
mhm. And like another example of using this, I'm looking at a game that has like a player shop, things that they can buy. And it is kind of sorted. It'll say like, here's what you buy to do lifesteal. It's like a whole tree of like suggestions. Here's what you buy to be more defensive. But it feels like the player's making one choice and then sticking with it. And we want a richer experience that feels more dynamic. So the tool that I'm going to use is doing the synergy map to figure out what the connections are between the items. Like we've already done one grouping, but I want to figure out those other connections and then find ways that they're not connected and try and connect them and make more interesting items, make more interesting choices for the player. So yeah, that's the thing. Cool. Anything else you guys want to talk about? It's 2:56 right now.
That's 3 hours.
It totally is.
You think that this is like, as far as like using this like exercise,
Mhm, mhm.
you did this.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
think there's a benefit for like other just like opening up a magic pack, picking the first legend that you see, and then going through it with a set or something?
So specifically in a game like Magic, uh, when a new set comes out, it can be really useful to understand what is strong and what is not strong. Where
Here reps, max reads.
Mhm, mhm. So specifically with this being done in a whiteboarding software, it's pretty easy to grab the pictures of cards and go, okay, even just the step before you draw the lines of grouping them into the mechanics that they is, that suggests a lot of things because once you've built those boxes, you can put another thing in here and go like, okay, this goes to this goes to this. It's great. It's great.
When you're drafting, making a decision on the spot, right?
Mhm.
Drafting card, like, that's my first mythic, so
Yep.
then my lynch.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you. I will give you your report.